Another weekend down, a lot to talk about. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Monday, March 17th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Happy St. Patrick's Day to those who celebrate. Scott, no green. I can usually depend on you for this.
I know. I've given you guys a hard time the past couple years for not wearing green, saying I was going to pinch you. But I'd planned to wear green tomorrow. It's just I'd forgotten the whole we've got to live in the future when we record the podcast late at night thing.
Don't worry. I've got enough green for all of us. I think we're covered here.
I think I got some green books behind me, I guess.
There you go. Today on the show.
You still deserve to get pinched, Chris.
We will catch you up on everything from the weekend. More injuries, of course. Lots of spring training standouts to talk about. Plus, Chris and I had our Tout Wars auctions, and we will recap our teams. Chris was in the 12-team head-to-head points. I was in the 15-team mixed roto. And it was a fun weekend. It was, we had spring breakout games. We'll talk about prospects later on in the week. Top prospects that you need to know heading into the season for redraft leagues. And there are real baseball games this week. The Tokyo series between the Cubs and Dodgers starts on Tuesday at 6 a.m. Eastern time. So if you wake up bright and early for work, or if you just happen to stay up really, 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 really late like we do, we're not usually up that late, but find a way to catch the games. Big thanks this weekend to Ron Chandler, Peter Kreutzer, and Jeff Erickson for the Tout Wars weekend. It's always a great time to meet up with people and catch up. And obviously doing live auctions is just a different experience, Chris. I don't know what it was like for you, but it's just always so fun to be in the room and battle it out, and the banter and going head to head with certain people for players. It's always a great time.
Well, I had Ariel Cohen in my draft room, so I got the full experience. Yeah,
he was in ours too, proxying for Scott.
Oh, so we both got okay. Good. I hadn't done like a fully in person auction draft like that. I don't know, in 8 years probably.
Chris, you're lying because you did AL Labor last year.
Yeah, but that was like a draft room.
No,
like we draft in a draft room. It's not like a person going once, going twice.
No, when we were in First Pitch, Florida.
Yeah, I thought we still had to like click the button on RT Sports. No,
I don't think so.
All right, then my memory's terrible.
So we'll talk about those drafts a little bit later on, but let's get into the news and notes. And we held our collective breaths on Friday as Austin Riley was hit by a pitch on his right hand, but thankfully X-rays were negative and he was back in the lineup on Saturday. So I think we're in the clear, right? Sounds good.
Yeah, him and Bobby Witt both seem fine, which is great news.
All right, well, the same cannot be said for Royce Lewis. Death, taxes, and a Royce Lewis injury. He was diagnosed with a left hamstring strain on Sunday, and it looked pretty bad. He came up lame as he was trying to sprint to first base. And the latest update we have is that he is expected to start the season on the IL. Scott, I'm sorry. I know you have him on your Tout Wars team.
I do. And that was one of the injury risks I was most concerned about. No backup third baseman. Scouring a 15-team roto waiver wire for a third baseman for week 1 is not my idea of a good time. And already off on the right foot on the wrong foot, I should say, in that league. We don't know the severity yet. Obviously, there can be different degrees of hamstring strain, so that is still something we're waiting to hear about for Royce Lewis. But it did not seem subtle, the pain he was in.
If we are following the roster resource page, it looks like Jose Miranda is the most likely fill-in, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that would probably make sense. Although I guess there's a chance like Brooks Lee gets back in there. I don't really know how likely that is. Frankly, I don't know if he's had a good spring at all. Even
they could put Brooks Lee at third and go with Edouard Julien at second, I guess. But Scott,
yeah, well, isn't they could do that? Isn't Julien the leading contender at second? Isn't that what we read? Or I guess we just read that he's supposed to make the roster in some capacity. But yeah, no, I mean Brooks Lee's had an okay spring, hasn't walked much, but hasn't struck out much. A couple home runs. He's looked okay.
All right, well, let's move on to yet another injury. Tyler Stephenson will begin the season on the IL with a low grade.
Oh yeah, somebody reminded me Willie Castro is supposed to be the primary second baseman.
There you go, yeah.
Gotcha. So,
He'll play somewhere.
yeah. So roster resources, Willie Castro at DH, which is just kind of weird, but
Yeah,
they have
I
moving
think-
parts. They could just
Yeah.
guys around. So.
Primary second baseman Castro, but I don't know that means he'll play exclusively second base. That would kind of be a waste of his versatility.
Yeah, I think they put him at DH and just that's their way of saying super utility.
Right. So it seems like one of
Yeah.
Brooks Lee, Edouard Julien, or Jose Miranda will see increased playing time as a result of this.
And look, Miranda was having a really good season last year before the back injury. So I do think there's some appeal there. I got him with like my last pick in TGFBI, and now it's like, hey, well, I can actually put him in my lineup. So that's nice.
All right, on to the next injury. Tyler Stephenson will begin the season on the IL with a low-grade oblique strain. And I guess the fact that it's a low grade isn't so bad because this happened in mid-March. So maybe he only misses the first few weeks of the season. The scary part is that his backup, Jose Trevino, also got hurt on Friday. A foul tip hit his hand and while he was catching, and thankfully he avoided any fractures there. So I guess Trevino, assuming he's healthy and good to go, will be the backup and the starter while Tyler Stephenson is out. But Scott, how far did you drop Tyler Stephenson in your catcher rankings? Is he still worth drafting in a one-catcher league?
Oh, he was pretty fringe in a one-catcher league. In fact, I think I had him 11th. So that's like I'm probably dropping him behind Gabriel Moreno, Austin Wells, Ivan Herrera, up to about the same point Sean Murphy is. And I originally ranked Stephenson ahead, so I'll probably keep him behind Murphy, but that puts him, I think, about 14th or 15th in my catcher rankings.
And the problem with like drafting and stashing Tyler Stephenson is do you really want to spend 2 draft picks on catchers in a one catcher league? If anything, I'd draft him and just pick someone up off the waiver wire if you want to take advantage of the dip. But in a one catcher league, I don't know if there's enough upside there.
Yeah.
I'd rather
it's
just
a lack
draft
of
Ivan
upside.
Herrera. Yeah.
Stevenson was supposed to be the safe, boring pick at the end of a one catcher draft. And clearly that doesn't apply to him anymore. So I definitely just roll with Gabriel Moreno or Austin Wells instead, who have more upside.
Mm-hmm.
I would be looking to buy the dip in a 2-catcher league, though, because I am in a slow draft going on right now, and he fell all the way down to 234th, and I was the one to take him. And a 15-team Roto League with 2 catchers, I mean, that's falling really, really far. I mean, Keibert Ruiz went right after him, but I'll just pick up either Jose Trevino or some other catcher to supplement that while he's out.
234?
234 for Tyler Stephenson, yeah.
I will note that Sean Murphy in my 15-team Roto League went about 100 picks after that.
All right, so maybe it's not far enough. I think I'm willing to roll the dice on the discount there if you're getting him that late in a 2-catcher league. I think he went for $6 in my Tout Wars auction. And Chris, I don't have your results right in front of me right now, but
is that Stevenson you're asking?
Yeah, Tyler Stephenson.
$1.
$1. All right, so there you go. Next up, the Rangers rotation took some big hits this weekend as well. Cody Bradford will start the season on the IL due to left elbow soreness. He won't throw for at least 4 weeks. John Gray was hit by a comebacker on Friday and later diagnosed with a fractured right wrist. It sounds like he'll be out 6 weeks. Come on down, the Vandy boys, Jack Leiter and Kumar Rocker. Leiter has looked pretty good this spring. Velocity has been up. He's throwing some new pitches. He has been a little bit more wild his last 2 spring outings, 8 walks combined. Kumar Rocker has frankly just looked awful this spring. A little bit better on Friday, but overall it's been pretty bad. Are you guys looking to draft either Jack Leiter or Kumar Rocker in standard size 12-team leagues?
I'm open to drafting either one of them. Both, probably not both in the same league because they're both pretty volatile. And I think the likelihood that either is a must-start fantasy option is pretty slim. But there is enough upside. Like, even in 2025, guys who throw 98 don't always grow on trees, especially guys who do that with really good breaking balls like both of these guys have. So I'll always chase that upside. It's with the understanding that the likeliest outcome is probably that they make a couple starts, struggle with command, get through 4 1/3 innings, and just aren't very useful for fantasy. But I will give them a chance and see if they can turn that upside into something more than just the kind of low end production you're getting from other guys in the range of the draft anyway. So I took Jack Leiter with one of my reserve round picks in Tout Wars today. And just let's see what the upside looks like. Again, there's a pretty good chance I'm just dropping him, but I will always take that flyer.
Yeah, I'm much more enthusiastic about drafting, especially Leiter, I would say, since he's the one who's looked halfway decent this spring. I'm much more enthusiastic about drafting him, knowing that it's not maybe he'll win a spot. He's in. And so it's easier to get excited about the strikeout upside, the addition of that kick changeup, and how good that's how many whiffs that pitch has gotten for him in addition to what he already had. Walks are an issue. Probably not a good choice if you're looking to safeguard whip. And just along that same vein, if we're talking very late starting pitcher picks, I would put Tomoyuki Sugano over Leiter, who probably would be a plus in whip. I would also put Richard Fitz of the Red Sox over Jack Leiter.
Scott's in.
I'm in. Yeah, I'm in. It was a hard sell for me, but I'm in on Richard Fitz. Zebby Matthews looks like he's out of the running now. He and David Festa
got sent down.
They both got optioned to AAA, which would suggest that Chris Paddock and Simeon Woods Richardson are filling those last 2 spots for the Twins. So they're out of consideration.
Simeon Woods Richardson and Chris Paddock, very uninteresting options, by the way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think it'll be long before we see Zebby Matthews, but it's I wouldn't call it the highest priority stash, and certainly it puts him behind Jack Leiter and those other 2 I mentioned, Tomoyuki Sugano and Richard Fitz.
All right, some quick housekeeping before we hit our first break here. It's bracket time, so get yours in now on the CBS Sports app. Enter the bracket challenge for the chance to win a new Nissan Armada and trips to the 2026 Final Four. You can also play in men's and women's pools with friends and join our FBT pool. If you were in it last year, you're automatically in again. Just make your picks. If you want to join our bracket game, go to cbssports.com/baseball. You can also find the link in the episode description. The winner of our FBT bracket game will get a 1-year subscription to Paramount Plus. Get the CBS Sports app to start filling out your brackets. No purchase necessary. See terms and rules for details. Let's take our first break. When we return, we will talk about some more news right after this.
One of golf's elite courses, Quail Hollow, hosts the game's top players at the PGA Championship this May on CBS.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today, catching you up on the weekend. And Spencer Strider will make his first spring start on Monday against the Red Sox. His first start since he underwent elbow surgery last April. And it sounds like we are still aiming for late April for his in-season debut. I feel like this has been mostly expected, so I don't think we're moving him up or down the rankings. I don't think we'd move him down, obviously.
We might not be, but he is moving up, yes.
Oh, yeah?
Well, yeah, he's up to 111 in ADP over the last week. In NFBC, he was about 125 before that. I think if we get one radar reading of him at like 98, he's going to be a top 100 pick in every single draft. I don't think that's necessarily logical. Like, we don't know anything new about Spencer Strider now than we did a week ago. At least if we get some StatCast data in this start and he looks good, okay, you can say his stuff is back. But the movement up is already just hype. And that's probably not the greatest idea.
Well, I think it would count for a lot just knowing that his stuff is still intact.
Right. No, that's what I mean. It would be fine to move him up if you see him pitch.
You're saying it's a little now, premature. Yeah. I just did my home league draft, which has a lot of Braves fans in it, as you'd expect. Although the person who did this is not a Braves fan. He took Spencer Strider in round 2 with 4 keepers already kept. So it comes out to like a round 6. So that would be around pick 60, 61.
Wow.
Still way too early.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, look,
maybe he's anticipating I'm going to keep him after this year.
Okay, that's I guess reasonable, but like the thing is, okay, he starts in late April. He's probably not going 6 innings right away.
I would imagine not,
and they're probably going to have to find some way. Like he's probably going to pitch every 6th day, I would guess. I wouldn't be shocked if the Braves went with 6-man rotations because I'm assuming they want to keep Reynaldo Lopez and Chris Sale on a similar schedule to last year where they both only made like 1 or 2 starts on 4 days rest, if at all. So there's as good as he is and as limitless as the performance ceiling is, there's a ceiling on the impact that he can make.
Sure.
Yep. Christian Walker is scheduled to return to spring games next weekend and should be ready for opening day. He's been battling a sore left oblique, but has been swinging a bat recently, so that's good news for him. Mookie Betts is battling an illness and showed some fatigue during pregame workouts on Sunday. The Dodgers and Cubs are set to start their 2-game series in Tokyo on Tuesday, as we mentioned. And yes, those games will count for the regular season. Not necessarily every fantasy league. You can kind of set that up if you have commissioner settings on CBS, but it just came out before we started that Mookie Betts will not play in that series. So keep that in mind. Gunnar Henderson said Saturday that his right intercostal feels, quote, a lot better, and he's hoping to be ready for opening day. Chris, good news for you. You just got him in Tout Wars.
That is Gunnar Henderson, right? Yes.
Yeah.
I moved him down a couple of spots, but he's been a first rounder for me the entire time. Something would have had to go wrong for him not to be ready for opening day, and it sounds like nothing has gone wrong. So I've been willing to take the discount on Gunnar Henderson. I got him for 35 in this league. It's a points league, but with roto rosters, so there's some deflation there. So you could argue I didn't really get a discount on him, but I'm fine with that price either way.
Rafael Devers made his spring debut Saturday. He went 0 for 3 with a strikeout, but it's just nice to see him finally get out there. And let's hope that, his body bounces back and everything that we hear, he continues to play games and everything looks good for Devers. It sounds like he will start the season as the Red Sox DH. Over to the Orioles, back to the Orioles rather. Grayson Rodriguez should begin a throwing progression early this week. Brandon Hyde said Rodriguez's progression, a restart, which means it could take some time for him to build back up. Sounds like he won't be ready for opening day. I think we expected that for Grayson Rodriguez, but this seems like positive news for now for Grayson Rodriguez. Yeah. Chris, we both won Grayson Rodriguez in our respective drafts. I got him for $4. You got him for $5. Unlimited IL spots with Tout Wars. So I was willing to take a shot at that, like $4. Who cares? So
yeah, that might have also been one where I threw him out for $5 and it ended up just sticking. Maybe
I don't even
that happened
know
to me a couple times. Yeah,
I can understand Grayson Rodriguez still falling a long way in 0 IL spot leagues, but if you have a couple, this is like that. He's already going to be back to pitching this weekend. When did they say?
A throwing progression early this week.
I mean, that's not much time to heal. Cody Bradford's getting more time to heal than that. It's like, it doesn't seem like it's that serious of an injury. Now, every pitching injury could be the thread that unravels the whole tapestry. So yeah, normal caution is warranted here, but it sounds like it's less that there was this big scary elbow injury than that he just needed to let it calm down for a couple of weeks, and now he's already to pitch again. It'll take a while to build up, but that's all we're waiting for. I think that's very encouraging news.
Jesus Sanchez will begin the season on the IL due to a left oblique strain, and it looks like Griffin Conine will start in right field. My guess is he's only a name for NL only, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he's got big power and gigantic swing and miss issues. So yeah, I would be shocked if he was relevant in more than 15-team mixed leagues.
Bryce Terang was scratched from the lineup Saturday due to right shoulder fatigue. Manager Pat Murphy said this was done as a precaution and the injury isn't considered serious. Clark Schmidt won't start Monday due to shoulder soreness. And you know what? The Yankee spring training reminds me of the GIF from The Simpsons. I can't say like what episode it is because obviously I haven't watched The Simpsons, but stop it. He's already dead. I mean, that's the Yankees' entire spring training. It's just one injury after another. I hope this doesn't turn into more, but the fact that Clark Schmidt was scratched from his start is not great news. He's still expected to throw a bullpen on Monday, but the Yankees, I feel like they need to add another arm. They probably should have done that last week at some point. So
call up Lance Lynn, bidding war with the Cubs. Let's do it.
The Cubs are already in. I will say, the Red Sox and Yankees used to compete for free agents and NL East titles, and now they're competing to have the most pitchers on the IL to start the season.
Only one of them has Richard Fitz.
We can make another Simpsons reference. Man, even the Marlins fan is scoring on me. So that's another reference.
Yeah. All right.
Keep moving.
Yep. Yu Darvish had Sunday's bullpen and Tuesday's scheduled start pushed back due to fatigue. The severity of the issue was downplayed, but who knows? I mean, Yu Darvish always dealing with something, it feels like. And
it's weird that they didn't
at some point this season. Like, we're not expecting a full complement of starts out of Yu Darvish at this point in his career.
It's weird that they didn't specify what kind of fatigue he's dealing with. AJ Preller said, at times for Yusan, less is more. So it sounds like it's more just a guy in his late 30s who's put together a great career already. Doesn't feel like he needs to throw a lot of spring innings. And I'm not saying like he's being a diva. I'm just saying that's the way it is with him at this stage of his career, and they're willing to go along with it.
Pirates manager Derek Shelton once again refused to name David Bednar the team's closer. Quote, I don't think right now we have that. I think right now we'll go and kind of figure out what we're going to do from there. No idea what that means. That's just the least helpful quote I think we've ever got from a manager. In 6 appearances this spring, Bednar has a 14.4 ERA and a 2.6 whip. Colin Holderman has been their best reliever this spring. Obviously, it's a really small sample size, but Bednar has looked terrible.
Dennis Santana is another option, but there aren't great options is the thing.
That's kind of been the issue for them for a while. Anytime David Bednar has struggled, especially last season, there just aren't a lot of good alternatives there. So I don't think there's much to get excited about here if it's not Bednar. And frankly, I don't think Bednar is worth getting excited about either. The thing is, he hasn't been around that long. He's not young. He's 30. So it's possible that whatever went wrong for him last year wasn't just the oblique, or he just threw his mechanics out of whack and he never got it back. So Bednar is someone, even like, he'd have to fall outside of the top 200, I think, for me to really have any interest in him at this point.
It's less the performance because it's spring, and by and large, you should ignore spring performance, especially when you look at the velocities for Bednar. They're all fine. It sounds like last year was more a command issue. He said he was overthrowing the ball, yanking the slider.
His velocity was up last year.
Yanking pitches, overthrowing the ball, he said, yanking pitches to his glove side. So it was more a command thing last year. The performance wouldn't concern me if the Pirates were vocally backing him. And it sounds like I was going back and reading some articles on Bednar from early in spring training. I was reading them this weekend, like in February. They were saying they have every confidence in him bouncing back. So why won't they name him the closer? Now, does that mean they don't have every confidence in him bouncing back? Really? I don't know. It's getting to be a concern. I do think it's possible. We look back at this at the end of April and it was like, Bednar has 7 saves and is allowed no runs. And we're like, what's the big deal? It's sort of like Tanner Scott last spring, remember? But the fact that he was so bad last year, I felt like he needed to prove something this spring. And the fact that they're not endorsing him, it's a little scary.
Wasn't there a similar Alexis Diaz quote today?
That they're not.
He made an appearance this weekend too, and also looked terrible.
Yeah, and there was something from Terry Francona, who is not at all invested in Alexis Diaz. It's his first time as the manager.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess I can't find the exact quote, but there was something there of like, well, he's got a week to figure it out or something. So yeah, could be a couple of assumed closers in the NL Central who may not have that much job security. And unfortunately, in both cases, in Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, the backup options are not great. I guess Taylor Rogers is better than Tyler. Which one? They traded Tyler.
They traded for Taylor, the lefty. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Tyler's the like
submariner.
Yeah. He was still there with the Giants. Okay. So the quote for Terry Francona was, "It's his third outing, and certainly we've got to lock it in here."
All right. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, between Taylor Rogers, I know Scott Barlow is someone who has some closing experience, and his velocity is up this spring, and he's looked good so far. So I guess those are a few names just to pay attention to it. It's crazy to me that David Robertson remains a free agent. I can name 5 teams that can certainly use David Robertson's services right now, but obviously the Pirates don't spend money, so that's probably not going to happen. You guys mentioned this, but the Twins optioned both Zebby Matthews and David Festa to AAA. Scott, for any early drafts that we did, are you continuing to stash Zebby Matthews if you have him, or kind of a sunk cost right now?
Well, I still think he's good. I still think he's going to have an impact. It just depends how valuable that roster spot is. And I think in most leagues of normal depth, or even on the slightly deeper end, I'm going to value the roster spot more than being first in line on Zebby Matthews whenever he gets the call.
There's no shortage of interesting pitchers who are potentially undrafted in a lot of leagues. So I'd be fine dropping him.
New White Sox manager Will Venable said Friday that Mike Clevinger will be, quote, near the top of the White Sox options for the 9th inning. Clevinger has thrown 3 one-hit innings this spring with 4 strikeouts and 0 walks. His velocity has been up quite a bit as well. As bad as the White Sox were last year, they were historically bad. They were 23rd in save opportunities. So, yes, they're awful, but when they win games, they're likely to be close games, right? Because they're just, I don't think they're going to score many runs.
And they have some interesting pitchers. They're probably going to be a little bit better than last year. They're like one of 3 teams that I think has a 0% chance of making the playoffs. I think there are 27 that at least have some small chance. The White Sox don't. But I am a little surprised. I'm in some very, very deep leagues that are like in slow drafts, and Clevinger's still out there. Because when has he been drafted this preseason? But now there's this comment from Venable that says he's at least the front runner for saves for the White Sox. I'm kind of surprised as deep as we are in these deep league drafts. And I'm talking about, we're approaching pick 400, that I haven't seen anybody jump in and grab Clevinger. I'm about to in one of them. I don't know. I mean, I'd rather have him than any of the Rockies options at this point.
Yeah.
I guess just because there's one of him and like 4 guys in the Rockies bullpen who it could be. And I don't know. Like, I have no idea if he's going to be any good or not, but
that's,
I would guess
he's in
not.
line for saves. That's all I need to know to have some interest in a deep road league.
That's all it is. Yeah.
Spencer Torkelson is set to see time in right field starting on Monday. He's had a nice spring, 10 for 35 with 4 home runs, does have 9 strikeouts. But with Parker Meadows and Matt Bierling hurt, likely to start the season on the IL, there's a spot at DH at least for Torkelson. And, they're trying to find ways to get his bat in the lineup. So just a name to watch early on. And let's see. We know he has big power upside. We saw that 2 years ago.
I don't know why. Well, I guess I do know why. Colt Keith is signed to a long-term contract. I was about to say, I don't know why he deserves preferential treatment over Spencer Torkelson. Between the two, Spencer Torkelson has done more in the majors. 2023 was pretty good, and he's had a good spring, but yeah, they got Keith locked up to a long-term deal already.
Tobias Myers underwent imaging Sunday to determine the severity of his left oblique injury. It looks like Tyler Alexander would be the next up for the Brewers, unless Brandon Woodruff is ready by opening day, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Doesn't sound like that's going to happen,
Yeah, and it looks like Steven Kolek could open the season as the Padres' 5th starter. Matt Waldron has an oblique injury. Kyle Hart has been delayed because of the flu. He made his spring debut on Sunday, but will he have enough time to be built up? That was his first start of the spring. That remains to be seen. Standouts from the weekend, and going to take a look at Friday's action. We've got some StatCast, some non-StatCast stuff here. Here's a name that we have not talked about at all. Eduardo Rodriguez, 3 2/3 shutout with 6 strikeouts. His velocity was up a little bit across the board. He had 7 whiffs on 44 pitches. Not sure he was ever really healthy last season. He had that strained lat in March, and then turned into a strained left shoulder. He didn't make his season debut until August. Richard Fitz, 4 1/3 shutout with 4 strikeouts, 8 whiffs on 51 pitches, throwing a new curveball and sinker. His slider velocity was up 2.3 miles per hour. His fastball was up 1.4, and it looks like he will be in the Red Sox rotation to open the season. Max Meyer, 3 innings, 2 runs, 4 strikeouts. He had 8 whiffs on 48 pitches. He threw that new sweeper 10 times. The velocity remains up this spring. Kodai Senga, 3 1/3 innings, 7 hits, 2 earned runs, only 1 strikeout. Fastball velocity down 2 miles per hour for Senga, who dealt with the shoulder injury last year, so just something to watch there. Carlos Carrasco, 3 1/3 innings, 1 run, 6 strikeouts. He had 7 whiffs on 61 pitches. I don't really think there's anything there, but he might be the Yankees' SP5 to open the season. And no StatCast here, but Tomoyuki Sugano of the Orioles continues to pitch well. 3 1/3 shutout, 1 hit, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts in 4 spring appearances, 10 1/3 shutout with 11 strikeouts to 3 walks. His Fantasy Pros ADP is outside of the top 300. So bunch of names here: Sugano, Carrasco, Senga, Meyer, Richard Fitz, and Eduardo Rodriguez. Any thoughts?
I mean, I talked about Sugano and Fitz a minute ago as they're some of my favorite very late pitchers to take. Fitz, part of what won me over is I did a search for him in my spring notes, but I was actually looking at last year's notes, and I made a note about him when he got called up last year for the Red Sox. His final 5 starts at AAA, final 6 starts actually, he had a 70% strike rate and a 15% swinging strike rate. And that was before the increase in velocity and the added pitches. And yeah, that's part of the reason why I'm suddenly excited about Sugano. I don't think we've gotten data. I'm sorry, about Fitz. I don't think we've gotten data on Sugano yet, right? All the starts, the top line numbers have been great, but we haven't.
I think there was one StatCast game.
I think there was, and it was exactly what we expected. It was like an 89, 90 mile an hour fastball, and he throws a kitchen sink. I think the problem with Sugano is I think the ceiling is probably pretty low, right? Like I think there's not. I don't want to say that because Seth Lugo just had the season he had, and if Seth Lugo could have that season, Chris Bassett has been really good. But those are the kind of names I think you're thinking of when you think about Tomoyuki Sugano, because it even relative to there are some similarities between him and Shota Imanaga. They're both undersized, they both have low 90s, high 80s fastballs, but Sugano's strikeout rates were really low in Japan, even relative to that league, where Shota Imanaga was putting up pretty good strikeout numbers. So my expectation is more in the Merrill Kelly, Eric Fetty, boring veteran types. What
might take him a step beyond that is how good of a ground ball pitcher he is with the splitter. So I don't know, Nick Martinez's line last year.
Sure.
I think Sugano has a better chance of mimicking that stat line than Nick Martinez himself does, of repeating it, frankly.
Sugano's first start of the spring, there was StatCast data. He averaged 92.1 on his fastball and threw 6 different pitches between 4 and 25%. So
that's more on the fastball than I was expecting. 92?
Yep, 92.1.
It's not bad.
All right, on to
I do want to add just Senga. I haven't moved him down, but I thought about it.
Yeah, I'm getting a bad feeling about Senga. There's been a couple drafts recently where he's clearly been the best pitcher, and he's been the best pitcher for more than a round. And I'm we saw him for 3 starts, playoffs included last year. Yeah. And the more recent of those in the playoffs, they weren't very good.
I think he had one good one, but yeah, it wasn't, it just, Yeah, especially because his fastball was already pretty bad. So if it's sitting 94 now instead of 95, 96, that's pretty concerning.
And even at his best, when we saw him in 2023, it was a very high whip.
Yeah.
The walk rate got better as the year went on, but it still wasn't good. I think I don't think we know enough about him, frankly, and he's not relieving my concerns this spring.
Again, that's Kodai Senga we were just talking about. On to Saturday. Jose Alvarado struck out the side in a perfect inning. His sinker velocity was up 3.7 miles per hour, which means he averaged 101.5, and he has been flawless this spring. 6 shutout innings with 15 strikeouts to 3 walks. Definitely just a name to know, at least in saves plus holds leagues. That's Jose Alvarado. Royals prospect Jack Caglione, 2 for 3 with a walk, double, 2 RBI. He has been blazing this spring, 9 for 17, 3 home runs, only 3 strikeouts. He was the Royals' first-round pick last year, 6th overall. Only got 29 games in at high A. He is a little bit older because he was a college bat. I don't really think he has a chance at the opening day roster, but I think Caglione is someone that will matter at some point this season in fantasy. Chris Bubich, 3 1/3 shutout with 5 strikeouts against most of the Guardians regulars. He had 10 whiffs on 66 pitches. He threw
that was the outing I was waiting to see from Bubich.
Yep, he threw that new sweeper 9 times, but did not get a whiff with it. Only 22% CSW, but it obviously was an impressive outing. And Luis Castillo, 4 2/3, 2 runs, 4 strikeouts. His fastball was down 2 miles per hour, averaged 93.6 on the fastball, and not really what you want to see after the velocity has been trending down each of the past 2 years. He could continue to build up. I get that, but I'd rather see that than not. So Luis Castillo, Chris Bubich, Jack Caglione, Jose Alvarado. Anything on this group?
You know, I might write something this week about players that just give me a bad feeling. Not bust picks necessarily. I don't have a strong enough argument to call them busts. They just when the time comes to draft them, I find I don't want to. And I would put Luis Castillo in that same category with Kodai Senga. Is
Reynaldo Lopez on there after we passed on him 9 straight rounds in our draft the other night?
Well, that's
you were willing to pass him forever. That
was not by Scott's doing.
No, yeah, I was campaigning for him at least halfway through that. But maybe, yeah, I haven't made a full list yet. I just know Castillo and Senga would be on it.
All right, and then some spring standouts from Sunday. Grant Holmes, 5 1/3, 2 runs, 3 strikeouts. Gave up 10 hard hits in this game, 93.8 average exit velocity against, but he built all the way up to 93 pitches in that start. So looks like Grant Holmes is pretty much ready to go for the start of the season. Jose Barrios, 6 shutout with 7 strikeouts. He had 15 whiffs on 70 pitches, 6 on the fastball, 4 on the changeup. Blue Jays prospect Alan Roden, 1 for 2 with 2 RBI and 2 hard hit balls. One was 109 miles per hour exit velocity.
He played center field,
yeah,
I believe, in this one. And Dalton Varsho is playing in games, but he is not going to be ready for the start of the season. He's, I think, only begun throwing to like 100 feet recently. And they said they basically said they're not really viewing him as a DH option.
Yep.
So Alan Roden has a chance.
I was going to say the same thing with that report, because before they were talking like, oh, Dalton Varsho, he's hitting so well this spring, he could just DH while he rehabilitates the arm. But John Schneider said if he wasn't ready to play defense, he wouldn't be on the roster. And then Alan Roden starting in center, just like you said, Chris. And
that's probably the right way to approach Dalton Varsho too. If he's not ready to play defense, he probably shouldn't be on the active roster.
I think Roden has like 6 walks to 1 strikeout this spring, and that's not so surprising when you look at his minor league data. Mm-hmm. I view him as like a data darling with the plate discipline and the exit velocities and how good he is at pulling the ball and elevating he does it. You wonder why he didn't have more home runs last year in the minors, because the package is there for him to do more of that, and he's had an impressive spring. I think he needs to go on the deep sleeper list.
I did want to bring up great X account, Twitter account at TJ Stats, and he puts out all this great data throughout the course of spring training. And he has a StatCast page just for Alan Roden's spring training metrics, and it's all awesome. Like, he's crushing the ball. The plate discipline looks really good. So I co-sign completely. I like Alan Roden as a in deeper 5 outfielder leagues, someone that you should be looking to draft with one of your last round picks. Astros prospect Cam Smith continued his big spring, 2 for 4 with his 3rd home run while playing right field. He's 11 for 26 with 3 home runs so far this spring. Chris, I'm so jealous you got him in your reserve rounds. I wanted to get him. I kept pushing the envelope because there was other pitchers that I liked a little bit more than him, but I feel like it's going to happen. I think he might be on the opening day roster.
I had a corner infield spot late in that draft, and I thought about going with Cam Smith and just to make sure I got him. I got Eugenio Suarez for $2 instead, and then I got Cam Smith in the reserve round, so I love that outcome. I'm pretty much at the point where unless he just misplays like every single ball hit to him in right field, I kind of think it's just happening. Yeah, I think they've been looking for. I think the way to put it is the only way at this point he wouldn't make the roster is if he gives them a reason not to. I think they've wanted to have him on the roster, and so far there's been no sign that he's not going to make the roster. It really feels like Cam Smith needs to be one of the biggest risers over the next week. Probably still a reserve round pick because he has a very limited sample size as a professional, only 31 games. And we saw as good as Wyatt Langford was last spring and as good as he was in his 34 games or whatever it was, you can't necessarily count on a guy with that little experience hitting the ground running, but it's worth drafting last year's first rounder who forced his way onto the roster. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I actually have Cam Smith. I have him in between Luis Rengifo and Connor Norby, just as a pure ranking thing. And obviously I'd elevate him if it was a shallow league. Like shallow league, shoot for upside. I'm all about that. Deep roto league, you might want to play it a little more cautiously for what Chris said.
A couple other standouts from Sunday. Just going to run through these. Sonny Gray got destroyed by the Marlins. Probably doesn't matter. It's a veteran, but 8 earned runs with 5 walks. His velocity was down 1.5 miles per hour on the fastball, sinker, and cutter. And he has a 13.97 ERA and a 2.28 whip this spring. No StatCast, but Hayden Birdsong was lights out for the Giants. 5 shutout with 8 strikeouts to 0 walks. According to Justice De Los Santos, who covers the Giants, Birdsong had 13 whiffs and 7 of his strikeouts came on the changeup. 4 appearances this spring at 12 innings, 1 run, 18 strikeouts to 0 walks. Walks were a big problem for Birdsong last year. It kind of looks like now he is going to be the 5th starter for the Giants, but that keeps changing. Brandon Pfaadt, 5 shutout with 7 strikeouts. He had 13 whiffs on 57 pitches. Kyle Hart made his first start of the spring since returning from the KBO. He is on the Padres. 3 innings, 2 runs, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts. He threw 5 different pitches with the sweeper, his most used pitch at 29%. His fastball averaged 91.1 miles per hour from the left-hand side. And Brandon Woodruff made his spring debut. 1 inning, 0 hits, 0 runs, 1 walk, 1 strikeout. Brewers beat writer Kurt Hogg said Woodruff hit 95 multiple times. Didn't say what he averaged. There was no StatCast data for that game. But Woodruff averaged 95.8 the last time we saw him in 2023. So hitting 95, I think, is a pretty good sign. He could continue to build up, obviously. But nice little spring debut there for Woodruff. Anything else on this group? Him, Kyle Hart, Brandon Pfaadt, Hayden Birdsong, and Sonny Gray.
Birdsong's been very impressive, and we saw some really big swing and miss stuff from him at times last season. Obviously, his major league track record was pretty bad, but yeah, I'll throw him on the pile. There's a lot of interesting names to consider when the first waiver wire run happens, if you've got guys to put on IL. And he's on there with like Shane Smith, and I'd throw Max Meyer in that discussion as well. Guys that I don't necessarily expect to be good, but I'll take the flyer and see that first time through the rotation.
I mean, we saw big swing and miss ability from Birdsong at times last year, and the command was just so bad. So I wish we had data, obviously. It feels like we're kind of flying blind without it. But just the fact that Birdsong has 18 strikeouts to no walks in 12 innings this spring, that sounds like he's addressed his biggest issue. And if so, there's definitely breakout potential here. I'm going to have to move him up the rankings quite a bit.
All right, let's take our final break. When we return, we will recap our Tout Wars drafts from this weekend right after this.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more. It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal! On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball. Today, we are recapping our Tout Wars drafts from this weekend. Chris was in the 12-team head-to-head points auction. I was in the 15-team mixed roto, and that uses OBP instead of batting average. But we will start with a look at Chris's Tout Wars team here, and I'm going to pull it up for those watching on YouTube. I will also include the link to both of these draft sheets in the episode description. So if you want to just follow along or see how much players went for, feel free to do exactly that. The point scoring system for this draft, CBS point scoring with roto style lineups, unlimited IL spots, trading is allowed. Chris, you used 80% of your budget on hitting, 20% on pitching. I'll ask, even though I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but was this part of the plan, Chris?
No plans. Come on, Frank. You know the answer. In AL Labor, I think I spent 38% on pitching. It just depends how it works. Now, what happened in this one specifically was I noticed that the high-end hitters were not really getting pushed up as much as they typically do. The one exception was Bobby Witt, who went for 51 when Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani went for 48 or 46, each. And, Jose Ramirez was 38, Kyle Tucker 35. For the most part, the high-end hitters were cheaper than I expected them to be. And so that's always what I talk about is get a read for the room early and adjust your strategy or how you're approaching the draft on the fly. And that's what I did. So Aaron Judge, I can't remember how early, he was pretty early on. But once I got him, it was pretty easy to say, okay, well, hitting's going to be the focus in this one. And I'm just going to try to find some pitching values. And what I would say is I think I got almost all good pitching values. I'm just not sure I actually like my pitching staff, which is those are very different things, right? Like I don't think I overspent on anyone. Maybe Grayson Rodriguez at 5 was a little bit of an overspend, but maybe it turns out awesome. But I look at the whole thing and it's like, I don't actually like the pitching staff very much. So in retrospect, would I have been open to spending a little more on pitching? Yeah. I think getting one more high-end starter would have made sense, but the hitting is really good on this team.
You know what, Chris? If you spend 80% of your budget on hitting, it better be good. And yes. I do think that your read on the situation going into this auction and seeing where prices are at and just kind of adjusting on the fly, I think that's a lot easier to do in a head-to-head points auction because at least in Roto, you have to be much more tactical about covering all the categories.
Yeah.
Right? So at least in a points league, you could kind of play the value game a little bit more and be really aggressive on hitting. And especially because you're playing in the roto style lineup, at least you do have to cover more lineup spots. So, and your hitting is pretty awesome, as we'll talk about here. I do think just kind of going into a roto auction with that idea, like you could still pull it off, but I think it's a little bit harder because obviously you're trying to cover all the bases there. For your lineup, you've got Yainer Diaz for 15, Sean Murphy for 1, Christian Encarnacion Strand for 1, Rafael Devers for 21, Eugenio Suarez for 2, Jose Altuve for 16, Gunnar Henderson for 35, Carlos Correa for 6, Aaron Judge for 46, Fernando Tatis for 28, Jason Dominguez for 13, Adolis Garcia for 8, Tyler O'Neill for 3, and Marcell Ozuna for 14. So, I mean, it's an amazing lineup. Like, there's no doubt about that. What's your read here?
First base is obviously a weakness with Christian Encarnacion Strand. I did draft Jamer Candelario as well, who should play, I think, a little more consistently than Christian Encarnacion-Strand, at least at first. So he will likely be my starting first baseman. But yeah, it's really strong all the way around, even though like Jason Dominguez and Adolis Garcia are probably better suited in Roto. I still think the value I got them for in a 5 outfielder league is very good. Eugenio Suarez, again, not great in a head-to-head points league, but if he's anywhere near what he was last year, that's a fine starting corner infielder. Ozuna for 14, I love. Yeah, I'm very, very happy with this lineup. It's got a ton of upside. It's got, I think, 4 top 3 round hitters and probably 5 from the top 4 rounds. The only thing is Yainer Diaz at 15. This was one where I might have thrown him out there at 15 and just, I think that's what happened. I threw him out at 15, hoping someone would push it up, and no one did. It was, I think, the first pick that wasn't bid on. I don't love that. This is his worst format by far. And if the playing time concerns that I have about Yainer Diaz come to fruition, that could work out poorly. But as you're scrolling through, you can notice catchers were really expensive in this league. Gabriel Moreno was $9. Shea Langelier was $12. I'd rather have had JT Realmuto at $9 than Yainer Diaz, but yeah, there were not very many catcher discounts here. So in that context, Yainer Diaz more acceptable, but I'm still not thrilled about it.
In hindsight, go ahead, Scott.
How does the scoring actually work? Because it's not CBS scoring, right?
Yeah, it's CBS scoring, but with Roto lineups.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought they changed the head-to-head point scoring every year.
Well, it's based on whoever wins the previous year. They can choose to change the scoring if they want, but I think they've just played CBS for so long. That
the
kind of
last year's winner went to a different league, so I think it also just stayed the same.
No. Sky Dombrowski.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he just didn't want to change the rules, I guess. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
this is
right,
12 teams, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Chris, in hindsight, I think the price that you got guys like Tatis and Gunnar Henderson were totally fine, but maybe getting a $10 to $15 player in one of those spots and using that money for another starting pitcher, is that something that you look at now in hindsight and feel you might have been better off doing something like that, or you still like the way it turned out?
Yeah, I think in theory that would have been okay, but then when you look at the prices, like, would I really feel better about this with, I don't know, Shota Imanaga as one of my starting pitchers, and I don't know, Randy Arozarena, who was a $10 outfielder instead of Fernando Tatis? I don't think so. So, like, I probably, if I was going to do that, I would have had to go into like the $20+ range at pitcher and get a legitimate ace. And I don't know if that would have been a better way to do it. So I'm fine with the way it worked out.
All right, the pitching staff for you, you've got Zach Gallen for 12, Tyler Glasnow for 12, Jack Flaherty for 7, Jesus Luzardo for 3, Ryan Pepio for 2, Shane Baz for 3, Grayson Rodriguez for 5, Robert Suarez for 3, and Bowden Francis for 2. So you do get one of the top sparps there in your lineup. Yeah, it feels a little bit light, obviously, when you only use 20% of your budget. You need, Gallen to have a bounce back season, Glasnow to stay healthy.
Glasnow's not going to stay healthy. I'm not counting on that.
Enough,
I need Tyler Glasnow to be a must-start ace when he's on the mound. And I think he will be. He went 6+ innings very frequently last year. He's not going to stay healthy, though. To be clear, I'm not expecting that or hoping for it.
Yeah. Well, because we have unlimited IL spots in this league, is that why you were more willing to take on risk with a Glasnow?
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly just that the price was so reasonable for him that I really didn't see much downside in it. Some of the other pitchers who were drafted in the $12 range were like closers like Ryan Helsley, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Bailey Ober, Sandy Alcantara. Like, maybe it's a little better if I have Ober instead of Glasnow, just because he's a better bet to stay healthy the whole season. But I think Glasnow's a bigger difference maker when he's on the mound, and generally speaking, that's what I'm looking for in a points league. So I would prefer having a stronger one. But given the way the prices worked out, I think it was probably about as good as I could have done.
Well, knowing now that it's a points league, that it's CBS scoring, I think that's the way to approach hitting versus pitching in CBS scoring points leagues, is you want to be more discerning about the hitters you get and less discerning about the pitchers you get. Because it's sort of the opposite from Roto. You want to, in Roto, I want to be more discerning about the pitchers I get. I want to have a really maintain my whip and not have a pick or two in there that's just going to blow it up. And the hitting side, yeah, you got to balance the 5 hitting categories in Roto, but there aren't as many ways that a hitter's going to just get sunk like in a points league, you know? So in a points league, I want to focus on hitters that, well, I mean, Carlos Correa is a good example, who really stand out in the format. You got him for $6, obviously some injury risk there, but if he does if he does what he did last year on a per game basis, it was as good as it was about as good as Trey Turner, I believe, is the comparison I keep using. But then with pitchers, you're not balancing categories. You're just looking for volume, and bad starts aren't going to ruin you as much as long as you're getting enough starts and as long as they're going deep enough into games. So I think the way you approach those two aspects of your team was right for the format.
And the reserves are fun too. You got Jack Leiter, Cam Smith, Evan Carter, Shane Smith from the White Sox, Jeimer Candelario, and Danny Jansen, who you need to cover Sean Murphy for the first couple of weeks of the season. So do like the reserves there as well. Anything else, Chris, that stood out just within the auction, things that you noticed? Was there maybe a player that you were battling for that you didn't wind up with, or a player that you just thought went for way too cheap? Anything like that kind of stood out top of mind?
A couple of things that stood out were like Garrett Crochet was $27 or $26, and who was the other guy? Wyatt Langford for $26. Those felt very aggressive to me. I get it. I think those players are good, but I think they were probably a little too much. But overall, I don't know. I don't know if there were any like standout. There were, I think, just some instances of like CJ Abrams went for 19.
Yeah.
It was fairly late and the bidding was very aggressive as a result of that. And maybe there was a teardrop coming up, but that felt like the wrong pick for the format. And then I think one thing that I do want to highlight is we saw a couple examples of the opposite of that, where Jazz Chisholm went for 16, which I know a points league is not his best format, but $16 for Jazz Chisholm is a very nice price. And I think people probably overreacted to the format not being right for him. And then
3.58 points per game after joining the Yankees last year was Jazz Chisholm.
Yeah. And then Ronald Acuna, only $17. So we're seeing, at least in this draft, I don't know about in yours, but at least in this draft, a bit of a drop off in his valuation, which I don't know if that makes a ton of sense, because nobody's really talked about April for him for a long time. And so the reaction is kind of to news that we already should have known. I know it confirmed what we already knew, but it's that was weird.
I had been under the impression it was late April until they said mid-May. So maybe I just wasn't current enough, but that had been my operating presumption.
I think that had been my hope, but I had
I thought May 1st all along, but
yeah, I think early May was probably what I was hoping for.
Yeah, I think it was complete opposite in mine. I think there was a bidding war for Acuna. He wound up going for I think double the price, like $33.
Wow. Okay.
So I'll look it up once we pull up my draft results there. But
I lowered him a tier in tiers 3.0 It didn't actually put him behind any outfielders in the rankings, but it took like a couple dollars off his price. So I moved him down with the mid-May news.
Yeah. And again, that is Ronald Acuna that we were just talking about. Let's move away from Chris's draft here, and we'll take a look at my Tout Wars auction. We'll run a little bit longer here so we can get through it, but it was a 15-team mixed roto auction, 5x5 with OBP instead of batting average. Unlimited IL spots. Trading is allowed as well. Probably should have mentioned this earlier for those who don't know. I shouldn't assume that everyone knows, but Tout Wars are a collection of industry leagues. There's all different types of formats. There's a mixed roto auction. There's a mixed roto snake draft. That's the one that Scott was in. There's AL only, NL only roto drafts. Chris was in the head-to-head points league, and it's all, the best players and industry people around. So that's why we come together for this weekend and we do all these live drafts together. And it's obviously a ton of fun. But for mine, again, it was 5x5 with OBP instead of batting average, unlimited IL spots, trading allowed as well. The plan going in was to spend around $180 on hitting, $80 on pitching. So like a 70-30 split. I got to 179 on hitting and 81 on pitching. So basically right on plan there. And speaking of the plan, I know you guys love plans. Here it is. This was my notepad going into the auction. And I think you guys will be proud of at least half of this. Look at the pitchers. No plan. My pitching plan was to just get values. That was my pitching plan.
You ran out of time, didn't you?
Kind of.
Don't be.
It was also part of. No, it was all. It was part of my plan. I figured it was so hard to predict pitching prices in this league, and I just think I'm gonna go in and get whoever I think is going for less than they should, and that's exactly what I went.
I just said it's better to be intentional about pitching in Roto.
Come on.
Scott's very disappointed in you.
To a degree. I mean, not that I go in targeting specific pitchers. I just want guys that are going to help my whip. That's the main focus when I've done auctions for pitching this year in Roto.
That part was, I was thinking about that. I obviously didn't want to get too many whip pitchers on my bad whip pitchers on my team, and my first two were Reagans and Logan Webb, and so that whip could be a little bit higher. My mindset then was, okay, let me get a whip contributor, and I got Bryce Miller as my SP3. So that was obviously intentional about doing something like that. Catchers as well. I just kind of wanted to get guys that were bargains here, but everything else was pretty much planned out. And I knew going in, I wanted to get one of Judge, Soto, or Ohtani as the fallback option, but really one of Judge or Soto because I was so bad in OBP in this league last year, and I wanted to be intentional about that and really just get that massive OBP base going into this draft. And I got Soto, but I had to pay the price to get him. You will see that in just a second. So pulling up the draft results here. This is my team starting with the offense. Shea Langoliers for 11, Keibert Ruiz for 5, Isaac Paredes for 11, Alex Bregman for 18, Jamer Candelario for $1, Bryson Stott for 11, Bo Bichette for 10, Trevor Story for 3, Juan Soto, $53, Wyatt Langford for 22, Randy Arozarena for 16, Tommy Edman for 7, Jorge Soler for 10, and Max Kepler for 1. Once I got Wyatt Langford, and again, I just pulled up the plan, I knew I was going to be at around $20 or less on all of my other hitters. And Langford, I threw him out early because I figured hype guy, he'll go for a little bit more. I threw him out for 15. He starts slowing down around 20. Someone says 21, I go 22, just expecting it's going to keep going. And I got it for 22. So I was happy with that because the timing of when I threw him out, you'll see later on, O'Neal Cruz goes for 27, James Wood goes for 24. So to get
that's better.
The cheapest of the three, I felt really good about that. So
for sure. No, I think Wyatt Langford.
Go ahead.
I think it was good, and I think you kind of needed him in the end because apart from Juan Soto, I'm thinking OBP here. Apart from Juan Soto, Alex Bregman should be helpful. Isaac Paredes should be helpful. Wyatt Langford should be helpful. Soler should be more helpful than people think. But I think Langford's going to be a big contributor to you in that category, and one that you might be suffering in it without him.
What do you guys think in general, just of the offense? Do you think it came together enough after, spending so big on Soto? 53 for him. It was, I think, 55 or 56 for Judge. Ohtani was, I think, maybe the second or third player thrown out. He went for 51. And again, that's part of the problem of trying to plan too much beforehand because he goes for 51. Obviously, in a vacuum, I would rather have Ohtani for $2 less than Juan Soto. But Juan Soto hadn't been thrown out yet, and I really wanted one of him or Judge. So that was, maybe I kind of penciled myself in a little bit too much there. But what are your guys' honest thoughts on the way the offense came together here?
No, I think it looks great. I think it's a 15-teamer, right? And so to spend $53 on one player in a deeper league, a lot of spots to fill, I think you were very economical in how you filled them. Only one other hitter who cost over 20, and yet you got some really good hitters. I love the Bichette price, probably it being an OBP league suppressed his value a bit, but if he hits, if he hits 300 like we're used to seeing him hit, the OPP is not going to be bad. I think it's a strong lineup for a 15-teamer. Surprisingly strong, especially given that you spent so much on Soto.
Yeah, I thought it came together pretty well. I was willing to go up over $20 for Alex Bregman. I was pretty excited to get him for just $18 here. Paredes, I really wanted Vinny P or Tristan Casas. They went for a little bit more than I was willing to do. So Isak Paredes was the fallback plan there.
I think that's a great fallback.
Yeah, in OBP, I mean, I don't know that the output will be that different for someone like Paredes and Vinny Pasquantino. I think Vinny P went for $18 and I got Paredes for 11 here. So.
Pasquantino should be a better source of batting average, but in this format, obviously it's an OBP league. That doesn't matter nearly as much. Isak Paredes should be fine.
It should be about a 350 OBP.
Yeah, I'd much rather have Paredes for 11 than Pasquantino for 18. I actually don't think that one. No, if I knew that that's what they were both going to cost, it would obviously be Paredes for me.
Yeah. On the pitching side of things, I got Cole Reagans for 21. Logan Webb for 16. Bryce Miller for 13. Jack Flaherty for 7. Trevor McGill for 8. Kenley Jansen for 6. Grayson Rodriguez for 4. Jesus Luzardo for 4. And Max Scherzer for 2. So only got the 2 closers there with Trevor McGill and Kenley Jansen. Didn't get any on the bench either. So that's, I think, could be a work in progress throughout the course of the season. But Scott, part of me not being intentional about pitching here was just let me get the values. And I felt like I did a really good job of like Jack Flaherty stopping at $7. Max Scherzer just got thrown out so late for $1. I went 2 immediately, was able to get that. Luzardo for 4, Grayson Rodriguez for 4, unlimited IL spots. So I'm really happy with the way the pitching came together.
No, the pitching looks great. I mean, I thought the offense looked pretty strong, but the pitching looks really strong to me. And it does seem like you got great values. I like that you only spent $14 to get 2 save sources. I think getting Grayson Rodriguez for $4 looks even better today. And that top 3, Reagans, Webb, and Miller for you spent 21 on Reagans and somebody spent 39 on Tarek Skubal right next to that. I mean, it's no question which I'd rather
37
have
on Steens,
price.
30 on Logan Gilbert. Yeah, that's a phenomenal price.
Yes, Cease went for 23. I have them valued very similarly. I think I would have went up to like 23, 24 to get Reagans and stopped at 21. So that worked out great. I'd be really thrilled with the pitching staff, and it makes me a lot happier about the offense you got too.
Yeah, I mean, and just for some context, you got Flaherty, Grayson, and Jesus Luzardo. I had that trio as well. You got them for the same price combined as I did, except mine is a 12-team league, and yours is 15. So that looks pretty good for you.
I will also say I don't think there has been an auction yet that one of us has participated in and not gotten Jack Flaherty for exactly $7. All the ones we've done, one of us has gotten Flaherty for exactly $7. And that's just kind of bizarre, but I do think it reflects a hesitance to buy into Flaherty on the part of a lot of drafters, even though I know they rank him similarly to where we do. They're just, he's apparently for a lot of people, one of those, I just have a bad feeling about this guy kind of players, and I don't share that bad feeling.
I don't really get it. The velocity's been there this spring. The results have been bad, but we don't care about spring results. We know that. And
results in terms of like he had one good start, but his start here on Sunday was bad. But with enough whiffs that I don't really worry about it being a stuff issue, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
And the way I was able to come together with this pitching staff is heading into the first break, I only had 4 players on my team, and I had the most money left. And they were doing a Tout Wars live stream on YouTube, and the chat requested to talk to me because they were like, "What are you doing, man? You've got all this money." And my thought was, a lot of the players that I wanted, my targets, they just hadn't been called out yet. And a lot of times I don't call out the players that I want. I got Soto early on, so I really just tried to play it safe. And I kind of, took a step back after that. And I kept throwing out elite outfielders because I knew I wasn't going to bid on those anymore. I wanted to get that money off the board at that specific position. And when we came back from the first break, Chris, like you normally say, the room was like a little bit tepid after that. And I was able to win a lot of these pitchers for undervalue. And I still wound up with the team. So I think it's a learning experience for people where if there are breaks throughout the course of your auction, as long as there are still good players left and you know that there are, you can get those players. If you have the hammer and you have the money to spend, like there's a finite amount of money that can be spent. If players are going for too much early on, which they did in this draft, I knew that there were going to be values and I had all the money. And money going into coming back from that first break. So
talent is not distributed evenly through the player pool. Like the true impact players are very scarce. And then there's a wide range of guys who are very, very similar. They'll do different things, but the overall impact will be very different. So what you want to avoid is paying up for the samey guys and not paying up for the difference makers. There are 30, 40, 50, whatever, truly irreplaceable players in any given season. And the next 150 are just not that different overall. And so what you want to do is sit out, be aggressive with that top 50, sit out most of the next 150 or so. And then once you're in a position, and this sounds like what you did, once you're in a position to push people around for the last good players in that next 150, that's where you start to pick back up. And what I often do is 6 players and 6 of the top 50 players or whatever it is. You want to be overweight in that. And then I'll just try to sit out for a long time. And then you'll always see me go pick up 5 out of 9 players once I'm in that spot. And it sounds like that's what you did, and it works out.
In the reserve rounds, I got Max Meyer, Zebby Matthews. Unfortunately, the news came out right afterwards. Austin Hayes, Chris Bubich, Luis Heel, and Zach Bean. I got a little bit too greedy with Luis Heel, the unlimited IL spots, taking him here in this spot because I was looking at taking Caleb Durbin as my backup middle infielder, and he went in the last round. I thought I could get him, but I wound up not getting him, and hoping that Zach Bean still makes the opening day roster. I think there's upside, obviously, on the bench here, and I have 2 IL spots. Throw those guys. Well, there's unlimited IL spots. I have 2 IL players, so I can pick up maybe a save speculation and a backup middle infielder, most likely, once I put those players on the IL.
Can I point out 2 things that I noticed with the last round of the reserves, just real quick?
Sure.
One, you didn't mention Lance McCullers is going to pitch in a game this week.
Right. He will.
I thought he was done. But he's actually going to pitch in a Grapefruit League game on Tuesday, I believe, or Cactus League game. I think they're out. And Ben Rice was Mike Carter's last pick in the reserve round. He is crushing the ball this spring. He's got 5 batted balls over 110 miles an hour and 20 over 100 miles an hour or something. He's been awesome. He dramatically underperformed his quality of contact metrics last year. Sounds like he's the starting DH for the Yankees. Ben Rice, kind of interesting.
Yeah, definitely a name to look at in some of those deeper leagues. A few other things I wanted to point out before we wrap up. 2 players that really stood out. And Scott, you would have just crushed me if you were in the room and you saw I did not go after Ozzy Albies. He went for $14. I don't know why I stopped. It was one of those things where I froze up and he wasn't really part of the plan. And I started thinking in my head, all right, well, how do I shift the money around to make things work? If I get this, and I should have just kept bidding. I had him priced as a $20 player. He went for $14. I got Bryson Stott for $11. So it's just comparatively, I was so upset at myself for not going a little bit further there on Albies. And Robbie Ray went for $8. I thought it was a great price. I thought with all the hype building, he very easily would have been a double-digit player. But, he stopped at $8, and that was another one where I thought, I probably should have won a couple extra dollars there. And and seeing if I could have got Robbie Ray. So those two in particular, I was just, I was so mad at myself.
There are always going to be a couple like that you just kind of freeze up in the moment. And then as soon as it's over, it's like, man, why didn't I go the extra $1 on that guy? That was such an obvious bargain. And then sometimes as the draft goes on, you look back and you're like, oh, well, I got this equivalent player for $4 less. So good thing I didn't go an extra $1. Or sometimes the draft goes on and you realize that was your best opportunity, the best opportunity you were going to get. And there will never be another one. And you just kind of have to compartmentalize that and move on. But I've noticed Ozzy, like I haven't been intentionally targeting Ozzy Albies this year. He might be my single most drafted player just because he's always there beyond where I think he should be, whether you're talking about auction dollars or in drafts. And so he seems like one of those players that people just have a bad feeling about. And I don't really get it. He's been very consistent except for the 2 years where he broke 2 bones, which are 2 of the last 3 years. And so I think maybe he has this injury prone stigma now. There is the unanswered question of, in an environment where the ball's not carrying as well, does his power still play? Because those were also the 2 years that he broke 2 bones. So we don't have a full enough sample to know, but the numbers were down. Yeah, I think probably that's overthinking it though. And you should just target Ozzy Albies as a top 4 second baseman and you'll be pretty happy with it.
And last thing I'll mention before we wrap up here from this draft, when Jeff Zimmerman won Junior Caminero, Scott, you know what he sang?
Caminero! Ha! Ha, Caminero!
It was hilarious. I started cracking.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, I also threw out Vinny Pasquantino and I said, Vinny P, baby.
We got a Vinny P baby in our and Here Comes the Money.
Yeah,
so
that one too.
Wow.
The influence is growing.
Let's go.
That
Let's
is
go.
incredible.
Next year, I got to show up with the soundboard and just play them every time someone. I should have just done it, like open it up on YouTube and just started playing sound drops while players were going off the board. But it was a lot of fun. Let us know in the comments. What'd you think of our teams? Both Chris and I. He was playing in the 12-team head-to-head points Tout Wars. I was in the 15-team mixed Tout Wars this weekend. We are going to wrap there. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.